I used to think the scariest thing about sleepovers was watching horror movies with the lights off. Now I know it's opening the front door after midnight. This happened when I was 16. A friend invited a few of us over for a Friday night, while the older sibling was supposed to be watching the house.
The parents had left that afternoon for an overnight trip and weren't expected back until sometime the next day. There were 6 of us all together. The evening couldn't have been more ordinary. We ordered burgers, played video games, argued over what movie to watch, and spent way too much time trying to scare each other with fake stories. By midnight, the living room floor was covered with blankets, empty soda cans, and half-finished bags of chips. The older sibling had gone upstairs around 11, saying they were exhausted and didn't want to hear us yelling all night. Around 12:45 a.m., someone suggested we make frozen pizza because everyone was hungry again. While it was in the oven, we heard the doorbell. Every conversation stopped. Nobody was expecting anyone. One of us joked that maybe the pizza place had forgotten part of the order, but that didn't make sense. We'd eaten hours earlier. The doorbell rang again. Then came 3 slow knocks. Not loud, not aggressive,
Just patient. The older sibling came downstairs looking annoyed. They looked through the peephole for several seconds before unlocking the door just enough to speak. From where I was sitting, I couldn't see outside.
I could only hear a woman's voice. She sounded calm, almost too calm. She said she was there to pick up her child. The older sibling frowned. "What are you talking about? My child is here." Everyone in the room looked at each other. There weren't any younger kids in the house. The older sibling said she must have the wrong address. The woman didn't argue. She simply asked, "Could you check one more time?" Something about the way she said it made the room feel uncomfortable. The older sibling closed the door, turned to us, and counted. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Everyone who had arrived was still there. The older sibling opened the door again. "We already checked. You've got the wrong house." The woman apologized quietly and walked away. We watched through the front window as her car drove off. That should have been the end of it. Instead, about 20 minutes later, someone noticed something strange. The porch light was off. Nobody remembered turning it off. The switch was inside the front door. The older sibling turned it back on and locked the deadbolt again. We laughed it off. At 1:30 a.m., another knock came. This time it wasn't the doorbell, just knocking. Slow. Evenly spaced. The older sibling looked through the peephole again. Nobody was there. They opened the door. The porch was empty. The street was empty. No parked cars. No footsteps. Nothing. They stepped outside for a moment before coming back in. I swear somebody knocked. We all believed it. We'd heard it too. Nobody felt much like watching movies anymore.
Someone suggested sleeping. Nobody actually did. Around 2:15, one of us looked out the front window and froze. A car was parked across the street with its lights off. It hadn't been there before.
We couldn't make out the driver. The windows were too dark. It sat there for nearly 15 minutes without moving. Then it slowly pulled away. The tension eased a little, until another knock came. 3 knocks, exactly the same as before. Nobody moved. The older sibling whispered, "Don't answer." A voice came through the door. "It's me again." The same woman. "I'm really sorry, but I think my child is hiding from me." Nobody said anything. She continued, "They're scared of getting in trouble. Could you just let me look around for 1 minute?" The older sibling answered without opening the door. "No." Another long pause. Then the woman asked something that made every hair on my arms stand up. "Then why are there 7 shadows moving inside?" The room went silent. There were only 6 of us downstairs.
The older sibling, and the person speaking. 7 people total inside the house. But the woman was standing outside. How could she know how many shadows there were? We all looked around instinctively. Nobody had moved. The older sibling finally said,
"You're mistaken." The woman didn't respond. After a minute, we heard footsteps walking away. None of us slept after that. We stayed together in the living room with every light on. Around 3 a.m., someone remembered the older sibling had left their phone upstairs earlier. They went to get it. A few seconds later, we heard running. Real running. They came downstairs pale. "The back door." "What about it?" "It's unlocked." Nobody admitted opening it. We checked. The door was wide enough that it hadn't latched completely. The older sibling locked it and pulled the curtain shut. Then we called the parents. No answer. Straight to voicemail. Cell service where they were traveling was unreliable. Someone suggested calling the police. The older sibling hesitated. What am I supposed to tell them? That someone keeps knocking. Before anyone answered, 3 knocks echoed from the back door. Not the front, the back. Every single one of us was in the kitchen within seconds. Nobody looked outside. Nobody wanted to. Then another voice. A man's voice this time. "I'm here to pick someone up." Nobody answered. He knocked again. "I know you're awake." The older sibling quietly dialed 911. While waiting for the dispatcher, the knocking stopped. The operator stayed on the line and told us officers were on the way. We thought that was the end of it. Then the security camera notification appeared on the older sibling's phone. Motion detected. Front porch. They opened the camera feed. The porch was empty. The notification disappeared. Then another alert. Backyard. Empty. Another alert.
Garage. Empty. Over and over. Motion detected. No person visible. Only darkness. The dispatcher asked if we could see anyone outside. The older sibling said no. Then the dispatcher asked us to check one more thing. "Do you have any indoor cameras?" The older sibling remembered there was one pointed toward the hallway. They opened it. The hallway was empty. But something caught my eye, near the front door. A faint line of light, like the door wasn't completely shut. The older sibling looked over. The front door was closed. Locked. Then they zoomed in on the camera. The line wasn't coming from the door. It was coming from the coat closet. The closet door was slightly open. None of us had opened it that night. Nobody wanted to check, not until the police arrived. The longest 5 minutes of my life passed in complete silence. Then we heard sirens. Real ones. Blue and red lights flashed through the windows. The older sibling opened the front door only after officers identified themselves. The police searched the entire house. When they opened the coat closet, nobody was inside, but there was something on the floor. A folding camping chair, an empty water bottle, a nearly full package of crackers, and a small backpack. The officers searched outside again. One of them came back holding a pair of gloves. They'd been dropped behind a bush near the front porch. Another officer walked over from the backyard. He'd found fresh footprints leading away from the fence. The officers believed someone had been hiding on the property for hours, waiting for an opportunity to get inside. The repeated knocks weren't random. They were meant to get someone to unlock the door. The woman claiming to be a parent. The man claiming to pick someone up. Different voices. Same plan. As for the motion alerts with nobody visible, an officer later explained they were likely triggered by someone staying just outside the camera's field of view, waving an object into the detection zone without revealing themselves. The most disturbing part came 2 days later. The police reviewed footage from a neighbor's security camera. It showed the woman arriving first. After she drove away, a man walked out from behind the side of the house. He had never left the property. He'd been hiding there the entire time. When the police released the timeline, they estimated he had slipped through the unlocked backyard gate before we even ordered dinner. Which means while we were laughing, playing games and watching movies, someone we never saw was quietly waiting outside the house for nearly 7 hours, hoping one of us would make a single mistake. Ever since then, whenever someone knocks unexpectedly late at night and says they're just looking for their child, I don't care how convincing they sound, I don't answer the door. The dumbest decision I ever made started with someone saying, "I dare you." It was supposed to be one of those sleepovers we'd laugh about years later. There were 5 of us at a friend's house, while one parent was working a night shift and the other was visiting family out of state. An older sibling was technically in charge, but they spent most of the evening upstairs with headphones on, making it clear they didn't want anything to do with us. The night started exactly how every other sleepover did. We ordered food, played video games until everyone got competitive, and watched random videos that somehow became funnier the later it got. By the time the clock hit 2 in the morning, nobody was even tired anymore. Someone looked out the front window and said the neighborhood looked completely empty. That's when the dare came up. Sneak outside, walk to the end of the street and back without getting caught. No phones with flashlights, no yelling. Just one quick trip. It sounded harmless. Within 5 minutes, we were quietly unlocking the front door and stepping outside. The air felt colder than it had looked from inside. The streetlights barely lit the sidewalks, and almost every house was dark. At first, it was actually fun. We whispered jokes, tried not to laugh too loudly, and dared each other to walk across people's front lawns, even though none of us actually did. The only sounds were crickets and the occasional car in the distance. About 5 minutes into the walk, I glanced behind us. There was someone walking on the opposite sidewalk. I didn't think much of it. People walked at night. Maybe they had a dog that wasn't visible in the dark. Maybe they worked late. I didn't mention it. A minute later, one of my friends suddenly looked over their shoulder. "Does anyone else see that?" Everyone turned. The person was still there, far enough away that we couldn't make out any details, just a dark figure moving at a steady pace. One of us laughed and said we were acting like we were in a horror movie. Nobody seemed worried. We kept walking. A few minutes later, we crossed the street, not because of the person, just because someone wanted to avoid sprinklers running on one side of the road. After crossing, I looked back again. The figure had crossed too. That caught my attention. Still, it could have been a coincidence. We turned onto another street. So did the figure. This time, nobody laughed. One person suggested we stop walking and pretend to check something on a phone. If the person passed us, we'd know they were just going somewhere. We stopped. The figure stopped too, not immediately. About 10 seconds later, far enough away that we couldn't see their face, close enough to know they weren't leaving. Nobody spoke. Eventually, we started walking again. The figure did too. Someone quietly said, "Let's go back." Nobody argued. We turned around. The figure turned around. Now they were behind us again. Every step we took, they matched. Not running, not getting closer, just staying there, watching. Our pace naturally became faster. Theirs stayed exactly the same. That somehow felt worse. We reached another corner and ducked behind a large hedge beside a house. The plan was simple. If the person walked past, we'd know we were imagining things. We waited. 5 seconds, 10, 20, nothing. Finally, someone carefully peeked around the hedge, then immediately pulled back. They're standing there. What? They're just standing in the middle of the sidewalk. Nobody believed it until we all looked. The figure hadn't walked past. They'd stopped exactly where we'd disappeared from view. It felt impossible. Like they knew exactly where we'd gone. Nobody wanted to wait any longer. Someone whispered, "Run." We all took off, not screaming, just running as fast as we could without looking back. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it over my own footsteps. When we finally looked behind us, the sidewalk was empty. The figure was gone. We slowed down. Maybe we'd lost them. Maybe they'd given up. Nobody felt relieved. The silence around us suddenly seemed much louder. As we turned onto the street leading back to the house, one of us froze. The front gate was open. We all remembered closing it when we left. We hadn't touched it since. The front door was exactly where we'd left it, unlocked. We rushed inside and locked everything. Nobody spoke for almost a minute. Finally, someone looked through the front window. Nothing.
The street was empty. We convinced ourselves it had all been a misunderstanding. Someone walking home. Someone who happened to take the same turns. By morning, we'd almost laughed ourselves into believing it. Until the older sibling asked us a strange question. "Why were you all outside last night?" Nobody answered. They held up their phone. I got a notification from the doorbell camera. Our stomachs dropped. They opened the recording. The video showed all 5 of us quietly leaving the house. About 20 seconds later, another person walked into frame. Not from the street, from the side of the house. They'd already been on the property before we even came outside. The video showed them watching us leave before following at a distance. Another clip showed us returning. The person wasn't behind us anymore. Instead, they appeared from the opposite direction nearly 3 minutes later. They stopped across the street from the house, stood there without moving, then slowly walked toward the front gate. The recording ended before they reached it. The next clip began because motion was detected again. This time, the person was standing inside the yard, just outside the front porch, not knocking, not trying the door, just looking toward the windows. After nearly 4 minutes, they calmly walked away. The police were called after we watched the footage. An officer later told us something that made my blood run cold. Based on the timestamps, the person wasn't simply following us. They'd been waiting on the property before we ever stepped outside. The dare didn't attract them. The dare exposed them. If we'd decided not to go outside that night, we probably never would have known someone had been hiding just a few feet from the house, waiting for a chance to see if anyone was awake. To this day, I still think about one thing. When we hid behind that hedge, the figure stopped exactly where we'd vanished. At the time, I thought they'd somehow seen us. After watching the security footage, I realized something worse. They never needed to. They already knew where we were going because they'd been watching us long before we ever noticed them.